Welcome back, everyone. It was last Sunday, I think, that we gave the class on Sukkot and connected all the three holidays, one to the other. So last time we talked about the mitzvah of Sukkot mainly. Being that in Sukkot there are not two additional mitzvahs, so I'm going to talk about those today. They are the mitzvah of shaking the four species, right, of lulav, the willow, the date palm, the date branch, the citrus fruit, the willow, and the myrtle. These are four kinds. If you look in Leviticus, you'll see that in the text in the verse there's a commandment that on the first day of Sukkot we should all take four species and shake them and celebrate with Hashem in perfect and complete joy. And it says regarding the mitzvah of the holiday of Sukkot in the Torah, it's recorded 3 times that God commands the Jewish people to be joyous on this holiday. On Pesach, it doesn't even say once to be joyous. On Shavuos, it says once in the Torah to be joyous. On Sukkot, 3 times it says we should be happy. So therefore, the rabbis in the prayer book, when they instituted prayer, every holiday has its theme. The holiday of Pesach, for example, is called Zman Cheruseinu, the season of our freedom. Shavuos is called Zman Matan Teiraseinu, the season, the time when God gave us the Torah. And Sukkot is called Zman Simchaseinu, the time of our joy. Even though on every holiday you should be happy and joyous. The Simcha, joy is a mitzvah for every holiday, but specifically on Shavuos, there's a special mitzvah to be happy. And in temple times, they would connect that happiness, that joy, with something called Simchas Beis HaSheyeva, which means the joy associated, connected with the drawing of the water. Let me explain. In the temple, there are sacrificial offerings that are brought every day. The daily offering, a sheep in the morning and a sheep in the afternoon, every day of the year. On the Sabbath and the Shabbos and on the holidays, you bring additional offerings, the Musaf offering. It's special for the holiday. And with each of these offerings, they would pour onto the altar libations of wine. Right? They'd pour wine. On Sukkot, there was a special mitzvah in addition to pouring wine, they would also pour water on the altar. They would pour water on the altar. And the water, where would they get the water for this offering, for this libation? They would go to a place, to a certain spring. It was called the Mayan HaShiluach, the Shiluach spring, and they would draw the water from there. It was right outside of Jerusalem, right next to the wall, or right outside, wherever it was over there, not far. And then they would bring it, and there was so much joy associated with drawing this water that it got the name Simchat Beit HaSho'eva, the joy of the drawing of the water. And it says that there were tens of thousands of people that would come and dance all with flutes and with musical instruments. They would do it the second day, not on the holiday itself when you're not allowed to have music. But it was just such a tremendous, tremendous joy. Men and women and children, it was an incredible thing.
Why from that particular spring?
Because that was near Jerusalem, I guess, right outside that. You had to get the water from somewhere. There wasn't. You had to go to a spring. I guess that's where it was. There was a specific. I don't know if there were many springs right in Jerusalem. Were there?
No, not too much water.
So there's not that much water there. So maybe that was just a convenient spring. And they would get the water, and then they would pour the water. So first of all, so we got these 2 mitzvahs here. Number 1, the mitzvah of the lulav and the etrog, the 4 kinds. If you don't mind, if I can have, did you ever see the 4? You know what it is. You all know what it is, right? You've ever seen the 4 species, Amelia? Yeah. So those are the, so we know what they are. And then we have the mitzvah to be absolutely, to be very, very joyous on the holiday of Sukkot. Now, this joy and this celebration, although we don't have the temple anymore, but we still have it in a different way. In many communities, they have bands, music bands that play at nighttime. In Crown Heights, for example, where I grew up, they had celebration of Simchas Beis HaSheyeva every night, all night till 6 o'clock in the morning. The band would play, not in Sem Sunday, outside. In the street on Montgomery and Kingston Avenue, they would set up a big tent and a big band, and tens of thousands of people would come from all over let's say 10,000 people would come from all over, and they would dance. It was literally, not everyone stayed all night, but the music stayed all night, and there were at least 1,000 people that were there till 6 o'clock every single night. So that and the Rebbe was the one that pushed this very strong. Since 1980, the Rebbe said we should bring back this custom and to bring the joy of Sukkot into the streets and to recreate the old ancient custom of Simchas Beis HaSheyeva in our times as well. I want to talk about these 2 great mitzvahs. So let's start with the lulav. And the esrog, the lulav is the long date palm, right? And the esrog is the citron, and the myrtle, and the willow. And our rabbis in the Medrash tell us a beautiful, beautiful thing about these 4 kinds. That each one of these 4 kinds represents another type of person, or Jew. There are the Jew that is the esrog, the citron. The citron is characterized by having a good taste and having a good smell. It smells good and it tastes good. This represents the Jew that smells good and tastes good. Smell meaning spiritually, of course. He does the mitzvahs, that's the smell, and he tastes good. He learns a lot of Torah. So he has both advantages. He's studious, he's into Torah learning, and he's into mitzvahs observing, and he's like the perfect Jew. Then you have the date. The date is what? The date is the date tree, right? The date palm, the palm tree, is where it grows dates. The date, if you'll taste it, it'll have a good taste.
Honey?
No, well, there's honey that comes from dates, but the very fruit itself has a nice taste. But it doesn't smell, you can't smell a date. It doesn't have a smell. So this is a Jew that he has a good taste, he learns Torah, that part of him is very strong, but the mitzvahs is not his passion. He doesn't have the smell. Then you have the myrtle. The myrtle is the opposite. Smells very good, but it does have a taste. The taste is not. Taste is not so good. So this is the Jew that does, his passion is mitzvahs, but learning Torah is not he's not into that. And then you have the willow, which is neither. It doesn't have a good taste and doesn't have a good smell. And that's both, he lacks both. So these 4 types of Jews, and that covers everyone. You die the mitzvahs to bring them all together, tie them together, and celebrate with them, and make them, and to unite everyone. Okay, so that's a beautiful idea. But here comes an interesting question. When you take a look at the lulav, at these 4 kinds, we make a blessing before we bless them. Right? Like every mitzvah, you make a blessing before you do the mitzvah. What blessing do you make? It's in the Siddur, Baruch Atah Hashem, blessed are you God, Lord, our Lord, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his mitzvahs and commanded us to take the lulav. Al netilas lulav. Now, that, and the reason why we make the blessing, and we mention only the lulav, even though the mitzvah is to take all 4, the mitzvah is to take all 4. It should have said, Al netilas daled minim, the arba minim, the 4 kinds. Why is it emphasizing only the lulav? It's a good question. So the simple answer is because the lulav is the tallest, it stands out the most, so that's the thing you see most, so you mention that. But here's an interesting question. We know that everything in the spiritual realm reflects everything in the physical realm reflects a spiritual truth. The reason why something is physically that way is because that's spiritually that way. Right? So if the lulav is the tallest, it means that the lulav is most important, spiritually as well. Right? That's why it became the tallest. God created everything, right? So He created the tallest, the lulav, of these four. He created the lulav to stand out the most. It must be because spiritually it also is the tallest, the greatest, the most important. But when you think about what I just said, that each one represents another type of person, your question becomes, it would seem that the esrig, which has both advantages, should have been the tallest, not the lulav. The esrig has Torah and mitzvahs. The lulav is only Torah. So why is the lulav the tallest, the most important? And we make the blessing on the lulav.
God's word.
That's weird, no?
No, it's God's word. He's.
I know, but we're looking for the reason. I know, obviously, if God wants it that way, that's how it is. But is there a reason behind it? There's got to be something behind it.
It covers all.
Now you have to remember
It covers the three.
Which covers the three?
The one that is more emotional and compliance to the commandments.
But the lulav is not. The lulav is the one that's compliant to Torah study. The esrog, the citron, is the one that's compliant to both. So that should have been the most important. We should have emphasized that one. Why is the lulav being emphasized? Because it's taller. Why is that one the tallest? God made the world. He could have made the esrog the tallest to reflect its greater, its special status. Here's another question. We compare all four of these fruits or plants to another. Each one has its advantage, right? So the citron has a good taste and it has a good smell. The date has a good taste, but it doesn't have a smell. So first of all, if we're comparing if the comparison is to the date, why are we not using the date? Why are we using the date branch? We should be using the date, not the tree. Doesn't have a taste or anything. In other words, when we're talking about the lulav, I want you to follow me on this. When we talk about the lulav is the one of those four species that it's kind of like, it's not even the fruit itself. The myrtle, you take the myrtle, you smell, but you can't, it has a bad taste. The myrtle itself, the one that's there. The willow, the same. The date, we're taking the branch of the date, not the date itself. Why not? Why are we taking something that is the branch of or the leaf of the date? Why don't we take the date itself? If that's the comparison to something that has a good taste but doesn't have a good smell, we should have taken the date itself, not the branch that protects the date, which is the long date palm, right? That's another question. Third thing is, with regard to the lulav, we know that when we do this mitzvah, we actually shake the lulav. Right? You shake it. So we don't shake. What shakes? What part of these four species ends up shaking? The lulav itself. The top of the lulav. You're supposed to give like a little shake with the top shakes. But the myrtle and the willow and the esrig and the citron, they don't shake. We're shaking the lulav. Why are we shaking the lulav and not all four? So what's the significance of shaking the lulav? If you want to shake all four. If you don't want to have them all shake, why shake them at all? Why is only one being moved? If you take a look at the mitzvah, when you do it, the top of the lulav gives like a little move, a shake. Why only the lulav? These questions might sound very, who cares, right? What are you bothering? But you're going to see soon that they're important, that every detail of this mitzvah is of tremendous importance and talks to the human psyche and to the human soul and to the human connection to God, as you'll see in a minute. So let's try first of all to understand what we mean over here, that the lulav has a good taste but it doesn't have a good smell. So everything I'm going to tell you now, the Rebbe spoke about, and he delivered a sermon on this issue, a talk on this issue. He explained the following. He said when we say that if the lulav is the most important of the four, right? That's the one we're emphasizing, the one we mention in the blessing. We must, therefore, it must be that we're not talking about that the lulav is not the person that doesn't do mitzvahs. He only learns Torah. Someone that doesn't do the mitzvahs wouldn't be, you wouldn't make that the special. You wouldn't emphasize that as the most important of the four, right? Obviously, when we say the lulav has a good taste, but it doesn't have a good smell, it doesn't mean that he doesn't do mitzvahs. Of course, he does mitzvahs. And the same thing with the myrtle, has a good smell, but it doesn't have a good taste. Doesn't mean that he only does mitzvahs, he never learns Torah. Of course, he also learns Torah. So what? And the citron has both. So what does it mean? They're all three learning, and they're all three doing. So what does it mean that one has this and not the other? They all three have all. So the Rebbe explains as follows: the esrog is the person that he does both. He does the mitzvahs with tremendous passion, and he learns Torah with great enthusiasm. The person, the lulav, the date palm, the long date tree, is the person that has a tremendous passion for learning, but he doesn't have the passion for mitzvahs. It doesn't mean that he doesn't do them. Of course he does them. He does every mitzvah. Not only does he do the mitzvah, he does it with great. He does it with every. He is meticulous about doing the mitzvahs. He's not lacking anything in doing the mitzvahs. But we're talking about an extra devotion to something. The Rebbe gave the example of the difference between a person who's married and a person who's a yeshiva student. For example, let's take the yeshiva student. My sons, they're in yeshiva. They sit to learn 10, 12 hours a day. That's their life. They learn Torah. Does it mean they don't do the mitzvahs? They do every mitzvah. For sure they do the mitzvah. They do it with great meticulousness, with great excitement. But where's their heart and soul? Where are they totally devoted? Where is the yeshiva student complete? What's his whole soul? Where's his investment? You can say that this person, his entire passion, his extra passion is in Torah. That's his life. Yes, he does everything else. He does it right and he does it correct. But what's his real, where's his entire soul invested? In learning Torah. That's what a yeshiva student is all about. A person that learns in the yeshiva. The esrog, let's now understand. So the esrog, the citron, is the person that has both. He's passionate about both. Could you really be passionate about two things at the same time?
No.
You can't really. It means, if you're into both equally, it means that you're not...
You're lacking one.
So, you're not lacking. In other words, they're both great, but you're missing out on something.
You're not giving 100% to both.
You could only be a slave to one master.
You can be passionate and totally invested in one thing. The esrog is invested in both with great excitement, but because of that, he lacks a certain total 100% involvement. You can't be 100% in two things, right?
Correct.
So the esrog is the person that is good in both areas, but it means he doesn't sleep even with one of them. You know what I'm saying? When you sleep with it, right? Even when you're dreaming about it, right? That's when you say a person is totally invested. His whole existence is involved. Even when you sleep, you're dreaming about it. The esrog is because he's involved in both he's very much into both. It means that there's a certain limitation to his involvement in both. Whereas the yeshiva student, the lulav, represents that person that of course he does all the mitzvahs 100%, more than 100%, but where's his entire, his 365, limbs and his 348 limbs and his 365 sinews, his entire existence is in one area in Torah. And therefore he can be completely involved in it. That's his entire life. He sleeps with it, he eats it, when he's walking in the street, he's thinking about the last thing he learned. That's his whole excitement. That's his whole life. So that's why the lulav is the more important one. Because this represents a Jew who has taken it to the nth degree. In Torah. He's taken Torah to the nth degree. And there's nothing greater than that. So it's not that he's lacking mitzvahs. He's not lacking mitzvahs. Someone that's lacking mitzvahs is not, we're not talking about that. That's not a level. But we're talking about someone that has both. But where is it? But he took one area of life and he gave himself totally over to it.
That's his entire world.
That's
It's
exactly
the Torah.
right. That's it. The learning of Torah. And that's the yeshiva student. So the Rebbe went on to explain as follows. That's why this particular Jew is represented by the date palm, not the date itself. Let's try to understand it. You remember the question I asked? Why is it represented? Why don't we take a date to represent the good taste? The palm doesn't have a good taste. You have to taste a lulav, put it to your mouth. You see what it tastes like. Not very good. The date is good. So why don't we use the date? Why do we use the palm? So he explains as follows. What is the nature of study of Torah? What is the nature of Torah study? What is Torah study?
To learn about God.
To learn God's wisdom.
Right.
God's wisdom, right? What's God's wisdom? God's wisdom is infinite.
Commandments.
It's infinite. God is infinite, so His wisdom is infinite. So think about this. God, is in His infinite wisdom, somehow made the miracle that human beings with such finite brains and minds and intellect are able to learn that which is infinite. It's a contradiction of terms, if you think about that. How could we sit down and learn Torah? It's like a 2-year-old would learn Einstein's theory of relativity. Is that possible? It's not possible. His mind can't absorb it. How does a 2-year-old mind absorb that? He can't. It doesn't fit in. After all, the difference between the 2-year-old and Einstein is a finite difference. One day he could get there. But when they're talking about the truly infinite wisdom of God, it's beyond the human mind. How could we absorb it? So God created a miracle. It says in Tanya, actually, that God contracted His wisdom and brought it down to this world so that we should be able to absorb some of it. But we have to remember that we're absorbing infinite wisdom. And therefore, no matter what you know, you never really got it yet. By definition. How much you learned, you can never say, I got it, I have it, I got it under my belt.
You want more. The more
It's
you
not
know,
only
the more
you want more. It's not only you want more. Even what you have, you don't have. Think about it. If it's infinite wisdom, how could you don't really have it? You don't really have infinite wisdom. So whatever you do have, and you have what you have, but you have to always remember, it's just this tiny bit. It's nothing. I don't really even what I do have in my mind absorbed and understand well, even that is just a smidgen of what really is there, even in this one topic. Forget about the whole Torah. So that's what the point is, that's why this Jew is represented by the date palm, not the date. The date has the good taste, the palm doesn't. What the message behind that is that we have to always remember we're not even the date itself. We don't even really have the taste yet, because the taste is really infinite wisdom. What we do have is maybe the leaf that protects the date. So when you're learning Torah, this is important to remember. What you have is when someone says arrogantly, oh, I learned so much Torah and I know. You don't know anything. What do you know? God, you know God. You know about God. You know God's wisdom. Is it possible for a human being to know the infinite God, the infinite wisdom of God? Of course, it's not possible. So the Torah, in its perfect wisdom, Hashem says that Jew I'm going to have represented not by the date itself, because if it's the date itself, he can mistakenly think I really have the taste of Torah. I really got it. I can smell it. I can taste it. I not smell it, but I can taste it. No, I'm not even giving you the taste. I'm going to represent you. That concept is going to be represented by the leaf, by the branch that protects the date. So that when you learn Torah with that humility, understanding that what you have over here is the infinite wisdom of God, and with God and His kindness, dripped a little bit into this world, so that we can have some connection to it. We have to remember that is only a little tiny nothing compared to what really is. So to say that you have tasted the Torah would be a gross mischaracterization. You didn't taste anything. You don't really have anything. What you have maybe is the leaf that protects the taste. You have something of it, but not the real deal. Because that only in heaven, because when the neshamas go up to heaven, then the neshama can maybe absorb some of the infinite wisdom. But down here, what we have is, and that's the humility that the Torah demands from a person when he learns. To know that when you're going into it, you should know, I don't really even begin to belong in this area, in this world. But God in His kindness allowed me to step into it. But hold your horses, don't be arrogant about it. Understand that what you're getting into is maybe the leaf, not the actual thing, because you really don't have anything. And then comes the idea of the shake. Remember we said the lulav is the one that shakes on top. What's the shake? What is it? So when a person is shaking, you ever saw people daven? They shake when they daven, right? People always ask, "Why, Rabbi? Why are they shaking?" Or when they learn, you ever go into a yeshiva? Next time we're in New York, I'll take the yeshiva to one of the yeshiva place, to the hall with 300 students are learning. They're all shaking. They're all shaking like this when they're learning. We're loud, and it's a whole commotion, right? It sounds like you're in a... Why are they shaking? They're the lulav, right? The lulav shakes. Why is he shaking? Richard, could you just... the lulav shakes. Why does it shake? The lulav shakes. The shaking represents that constant yearning of a person that he wants more. He's not there yet. He wants more, like a fire. Like a fire. What is a fire? A fire in a wick, it's always flickering. You know why? Why is a fire always moving up and down, up and down? You see a fire, it's always moving up and down, right? Because the fire wants to separate from the wick. It really wants to go all the way up to its source. The fire's source is up high. So it's always looking to leave the wick and be absorbed in it. That's why the fire is called a neshama. Yeah. It says, Neir Hashem, Nishmat Adam. The candle of God is the soul of man. It's a verse in the Bible. What is the meaning of that? Because the neshama is always shaking. The neshama is always yearning for more. It's never content. Because whatever it has, it knows it has nothing. Because it's in this world, and what can it have of it? It's finite, it's stuck in a body, and the infinite wisdom of God is totally beyond it. It's always trying to, shake its way out of this limited world. So that's the idea of a Jew shaking when he's davening. He's shaking because it represents the yearning of the neshama to that which is beyond it, which is what it's supposed to experience during davening. Or when it's learning, it's shaking. Why? Because when you're learning, you realize whatever I have, I don't really have, and I'm yearning and shaking my way to something higher, because I know whatever I have, my mind is too small to really absorb. So I'm always looking for more, because there's always more. So that's why the lulav is the one that shakes, because the lulav represents the Jew that's totally involved in learning. His whole life is dedicated to the study of Torah, so he knows that he must be shaking his whole life through this limited world, because he knows that there's so much beyond it. Understood? So next time you learn Torah, understand, remind yourself of the lulav. You don't really even have the date itself. You're represented by something that is a shield of the date, around the date. And guess what happens when you learn with that humility? And the Torah that you do understand and learn and absorb is protected. You see, that's the idea. You're taking someone that's arrogant forgets everything he learns. He's not really learning Torah. He's in touch with his own arrogance, his own ego. He's not really in touch with God. So even the Torah that he did learn is not really as unprotected. It's not really, it lacks the holiness, it lacks the godliness, because if you think that you really have it, and you bad, I got under my belt, you have nothing under your belt. So that arrogance is what destroys even the little bit that you do have, that you don't really have it. So what protects the Torah that you do learn with humility, that's protected. You have it. And Hashem makes sure that you remember it and you understand it properly. Because what happens when you learn Torah with arrogance is you can also not even, you can make a mistake in how you understand it. You can apply it wrong. Because if your ego is mixed in, then you're biased. So you're not really going to be able to even reach a perfect understanding of what God is talking about, of what the Torah is talking about, of God's wisdom. But when you have humility and you recognize that the taste I don't even have, and I have to shake my way all the way till forever I'll have to shake my way to something greater because it's really infinite. Then God protects you. That what you do learn, you should learn properly, and you should not veer off and who knows what. And you should be able to be loyal to the Torah. So the protective branch of the date, which is the lulav, is also represented by that. That when you learn with that humility, you shake it. And you don't have the date, that's when you know that what you do have is protected. So that's why what we do use is the leaf that protects the date. You understand what I'm saying? So that your Torah that you do learn, you'll protect it. God protects you so that you shouldn't veer off. So a lot of times people learn and they get it all wrong. That's very dangerous. Imagine you're learning Torah, you're dedicating yourself to learn, and you come up with the wrong conclusion because of your arrogance. So the first thing you have to do is have the humility to understand that when it comes to Torah, it's God's wisdom. It's a real gift. It's a kindness of God that He took such small minds and gave them the opportunity to connect with Him. So that humility has to always be at the foundation of our study of Torah. So that's why the lulav, we shake the lulav. And that's why Jews shake when they learn. It's the same idea, because the lulav is the Torah Jew. And the Torah Jew must always shake. Meaning, unless it confuses your concentration when you learn it. Sometimes when you go like this, you can't concentrate, it's better not to. But the idea behind the shake is that you realize that you're always looking for more. You never really have it. And when you have that humility, that, humbleness, then at least you have the protective branch of the date, which is the palm branch, which protects the little bit that you do have, that you don't veer off, and you're loyal and you understand it properly. Because let me tell you, I've met a lot of people that when they learn Torah, they just don't get it. They just don't get it. They think they understand it, but they're so far from understanding what they're learning because they lack the humility that comes along with the study of Torah. Now we can understand why Sukkot is such a day of celebration, of such joy, unbounded joy. There's nothing like Sukkot. It's unbounded joy. When the Jew realizes and this joy is also connected to the water libation. Why? What's water? What's the difference between wine and all year round we pour wine, and in Sukkot we pour water. What's the difference between water and wine? On Sukkot, what's the difference between water and wine? You know the difference. Wine has a good taste. Water is flat.
Purity?
Yeah. Wine it has a good taste. It represents the joy that we have, or the pleasure that we have. Well, wine, you drink wine, you have pleasure from drinking wine. Water doesn't give you much pleasure. It quenches your thirst, but it doesn't give you pleasure. Oh, did you taste that water? Wow, that's a great taste. No, water doesn't have a good taste. Wine, you say, yeah, you got to taste that wine. Wine has pleasure. On Sukkot, we recognize that our relationship with Hashem is one
Transparency.
that is completely dictated and initiated by God. Meaning, when we talk about wine, that represents a person that understands and he enjoys what he's doing and he has an appreciation for it and it's all great. And it's like wine to him. The water represents the Jew that learns and davens and does the mitzvahs because God said to do it. Not because he understands what he's doing and he knows and he appreciates and he has pleasure in doing it. It's a much higher level of commitment. You understand? The water represents the essence of the soul in that sense. Why is the soul davening? Why is the soul learning? Why is the soul putting on tefillin? Why is the soul lighting Shabbos candles? Why is the Jew doing all these things? Because he understands how joyous and pleasurable it is. That's a lower level of commitment, of observance. The higher level of observance is the water Jew. The one that does it because God said to do it, whether I understand or I don't. Total commitment. So that's why, when you're in touch with God at that level, I want you to understand what the difference is. You understand the difference between wine and water in the spiritual realm. The wine represents the Jew that's limited in his scope. And how much he understands and takes pleasure in it. That's very limited. How much could you understand? When you sit down and learn, you went through a class, Oh, I enjoyed this class. Why do you say, I enjoyed this class? I understood what the rabbi said, and it made a lot of sense, and it makes, it sits well with my frame of thinking, and it just, that's very nice, and should be that way. You should try to understand what you're learning, and enjoy what you're learning. But it tells you, it also represents the limitations that come along with it. How much could you understand? We said before, what do we have? What do we have? Finite minds. The Jew that learns Torah and does mitzvahs in the water, with the water approach, is the one that's really in touch with God. He's stepping beyond his own frame of reference. He's not worried and concerned about how much I enjoy. If you're worried and you're only going to do what you enjoy, you're going to only do very little. Because how much could you really enjoy when you're talking about infinite wisdom and infinite mitzvahs? But when you do it because Hashem said so, like you said before, it's God's word, that's the water Jew. He doesn't concern himself whether he understands and he appreciates and he loves and he tastes and he's beyond that. I am now a servant of God, and whatever he says, I do. That makes a person in touch with a higher level of Hashem, and that's because he's in touch with a higher level of himself, his essence of his neshama. Then by the way, when you're joyous about being a Jew, it's because it is the second level, not the first. It's unlimited joy, because it's unlimited mitzvahs, it's unlimited Torah, it's unlimited God. When you're in touch with your own limitations, how much I observe, how much I understand, how much I appreciate, how much I enjoy, it's about you and your limitations. So the joy is not either unlimited. How much do you enjoy wine? As much you enjoy it, whatever. It wears off after a while. The joy that comes with water doesn't wear off.
It takes away your thirst.
It quenches you, it gives you life itself. Gives you life itself. The wine doesn't give you life itself, it gives you pleasure. The water gives you life, it doesn't give you pleasure. That's the difference between the water Jew and the wine Jew. The wine Jew is the person that enjoys and that gets a lot out of his Torah and mitzvahs, but it's all limited. The water Jew represents the Jew that's really alive. He's really in touch with God, even though he doesn't really maybe fully understand and comprehend and grasp everything, but he's in touch with God. God's holding on to him. On God's terms, not on our terms. And that's an unlimited joy. That's a joy that breaks all bounds. So that's the lulav. The lulav that shakes is the water Jew. They're all connected, you understand. The lulav that doesn't shake, the Jew that thinks I have 100 pages of the Talmud under my belt, will never have unlimited joy. This is a person that's not shaking. He doesn't see the need for more. Because I'm very content, I'm very happy with what I have. So even that he doesn't have. Because you can never really have it. It's God's wisdom. The only way you can have it is you realize that you can't have it, then you have it. When you're humble enough to understand that I don't have anything, then you really start getting it. Then God starts giving it to you on his terms. And then you protect it, then you have not the fruit, you have the branch and all that. So everything in this mitzvah and this holiday is interconnected. The lulav Jew is the high, we make the blessing on Latilat Lulav, because that's the highest level Jew, really, in a way, because his entire existence is dedicated to one area of divine service, which is learning Torah. Not that he doesn't do the mitzvahs, God forbid, of course he does, but that's his whole life, and he's shaking away he's in a constant yearning for more, because he knows that that whatever he has is not really it, and there's always so much more, it's really infinite. And he doesn't even have the date itself, because he doesn't have the taste, because the taste would mean that you already think you're starting to have it already. You're starting to get pleasure from what you have. You don't even have the taste. It's God's wisdom. Don't forget that ever. It's infinite. So what could a human finite mind really absorb? So that constant friction, I'm learning, but I always know that it's infinite wisdom. So what I have is really not really it, and I'm always yearning for more. That push, that constant strain, that shake, that's constantly getting you to understand that there's so much more, and it's really infinite. What you have is really nothing. That humility is the water that we're talking about. And when you're in that level, the joy is infinite, because you understand, because then you're really taking in infinite wisdom. But the minute your ego got involved, and you think, oh, I got it, then you lost it. Then you lost it. You're back to the wine. You're in limited territory. But when you realize you don't have it, that's when God starts giving it to you, and then you start dancing. Then you're dancing unlimited. Then you grab the Torah and Simchas Torah, and you're dancing like there's no tomorrow. Because you're really you're in heaven. What do you mean you're in heaven? You realize that you're in touch with the infinite God. You're in touch with the infinite God. And the only way we can be in touch with the infinite God is if we're less in touch with ourselves. If we're less in touch with ourselves. So the less you are involved in your own ego, the more you're in touch with God. And the more you're into your own ego, the more you lose God. Mm-hmm. So that's true with Torah study. That's a prerequisite to have the lulav approach. Total dedication, but keep shaking.
Okay.
Keep shaking.
Thank you.
And never think you have the date itself. You never do.
You have mentioned before that Torah is equal to water.
Correct. That's true. Yeah. That's also connected right in.
Right. And you mentioned prior, if you say, God, He's my life, I depend on Him. That's self-love, according to a prior class.
If I say I'm dependent on Him, that's self-love.
Is at a lower level. But when you are at a higher level, you say, I want God. Everything is about God. He's the greatest. There's nothing but God. So that would be the water connection.
Maybe. I don't remember exactly. But fine. It makes sense what you're saying.
There's two levels. Maybe the wine
when you're concerned
and the water.
When you're concerned about yourself, so then you're thinking about yourself. Well, listen, we're not angels. We do think about ourselves. But we have to always measure it and understand to keep the lulav concept in mind, every detail of it. It's not the date itself, it's the branch that doesn't have a taste. Mm-hmm. So that you always remember that even what I'm learning, I've learned 100 pages, 200 pages, 500 pages. I haven't had the taste yet. I haven't even started. I haven't even touched the surface.
I want more.
And that's why you keep shaking. Because it's infinite. You can, by definition, you can't get it. When you have that humility, God says, okay, now let me give it to you.
With humility, you mentioned it. Mm-hmm. He will reveal Himself.
Have a wonderful Sukkot, everyone.